Good evening and welcome to this Planning Commission. The date is Monday, September 24th. Will everyone please rise for pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. You may be seated. First action item is the actual approval of tonight's agenda. Does anyone have any changes which they'd like to make? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The next item is the approval. We have actually two approval of minutes. The first minutes for approval are the August 27th, 2012 meeting. Does anybody have any changes that they need to make? I'm not seeing any. Entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, move for approval.
Second.
The motion second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Moving on would be the minutes for the September 10th, 2012 meeting. Does anybody have any changes? I know a lot of us were not here that night. I was one of them.
Move to approve.
The motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have a couple of abstentions. I would be one of them.
I
Julie?
abstain.
I would be 3.
Is that it?
You were there. You weren't there. Yes, yes, that's right.
Matt was one of the only ones here, I think. All right. Moving on, we'll go to the public hearings. The first public hearing, Mr. Franz and I will turn right over to you for a brief explanation.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, we have two items covering the same topic. At the time that we were putting the public hearing notice together, we weren't certain about the path that we were going to choose for review. After it was published, we determined that to designate this site as a heritage preservation site with a conditional use permit for adaptive reuse as an entertainment center was better than going through a guide plan change process and a rezoning. So for the first public hearing tonight, the staff recommendation is to cancel the public hearing. For the second item, the appropriate action is to continue the public hearing. And the reason we're continuing that hearing is that we need to have an advisory recommendation from the Heritage Preservation Commission to designate it as a heritage preservation site, and secondly, to have comments on the conditional use. So that's scheduled to happen on October 15th, so we'll package that information and this request back to you on October 22nd.
Okay. So do I need to go ahead and read all the requests and everything, or can we just move forward?
I think that you can move forward to cancel the first public hearing on the Schuessler barn.
Okay.
And then as a second action, you can move to recommend a continuance of item B to the October 22nd, 2012 Planning Commission meeting.
Okay. Very good. Commissioners, with that being said, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to cancel the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Anybody else for the second one?
Mr. Chairman, move to recommend a continuance to October 22nd, 2012 Planning Commission meeting.
Second. Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Moving on. The next project for a public hearing is called Bella Reeve. The location of the project is 10701 Riverview Road. The request is for zoning district change from rural to R1-13.5 on 23 acres, a preliminary plot on 23 acres into 10 lots. With that being said, will the proponent of the project please come forward and tell us a little bit about your project? Also, give us your name and your address. Spell your last name for city record, please.
Good evening. My name is Marty Campion, Campion Engineering, project engineer for the project. Also here tonight is Keith Waters and Associates, the land planner, and Mike Gresser, the project owner. What we're proposing is 10 lots on 23 acres. The 10 lots are all on the upland side of the property. The property generally slopes from north to south down towards the river. Our utilities, sewer, water, are going to be extended from the northeast corner of the site, westerly along Riverview Road, and then southerly into the cul-de-sac. So all utilities are readily available on site. All of the lots do meet the requirements of the R13.5. We've taken great care to try and preserve some of the amenities. The site is rich in amenities. We've taken great care to preserve not only the views that will be afforded to the property owners of the river and to the south. Also, if you've been to the site, the existing driveway, there are trees that line, nice mature trees that line the existing driveway. We've aligned the proposed cul-de-sac with the existing driveway. That row of trees will create a nice corridor as you come onto the site. So we've also met with staff a number of times. We've seen the staff report. We are, with the exception of one of the conditions, we're in concurrence with everything that staff is recommending. The one condition that will warrant further discussion is the outlot along the river. And Mike Gresser, the project owner, will speak to that. But if you have any questions relative to the land planning or the engineering, Keith or I will speak to that. Anything specific to the site and the history of the site, Mike would probably be apt to answer that for you.
Can we hear real quick about that outlot? I would like to get that out of the way before we went to city staff, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry?
Can we hear a little bit about that outlot and what needs to be discussed? Thank you very much.
I can speak to that.
Can you give us your name, please, too, for city record?
My name is Mike Gresser, 10701 Riverview Road. I'm the project owner. Actually, my home is there, and we're going to make the development around my home and continue to live on the property. The reason that further discussion is warranted on the outlot dimension is staff has asked for 150 feet of width at the river for the trail system. And while they're accurate in their statement that it does match up to the property immediately adjacent to the west of ours, there was a 150-foot dedication there. If you go to the property next to them, further west, the landings or the Schlamp development, I believe it's Walnut Ridge, that's a 75-foot dedication. And then to the east, on the property that was developed, the Vintage, from the best we've been able to determine, there's been no dedication there. That down at the river is still owned privately. The property for many years has been maintained. It's an original oak savanna, hardwood savanna down the back riverside, which is the way Eden Prairie originally looked. We've looked at aerial photos from actually the 1940s that show that the invasive species were kept out of the area, and that because of burn-offs from lightning, the oak savanna was able to thrive in the area. Well, we haven't been able to burn it off, but for the 50 years prior to me and the last 7 years that I've owned it, we've taken great care to maintain it in its original savanna condition. And the two items that I want to discuss with staff is with the outlots that we have the right. I'm familiar with some of the land owned by the city at this point. There's some complaints about lack of ability to maintain, keep invasive species out, and we want to have the ability to do that in that area down near the river. It's important that it doesn't get taken over by invasive species. And then secondly, my own opinion is just that 150 feet for a trail, we're talking about nearly 4 acres of dedication. If it's 75 feet, it's 2 acres of dedication. And third item is at 150 feet, that dedication would encroach the property. If you look at it, the wetlands delineation, it actually occurs not immediately at the riverbank. There's an elevated area at the riverbank that's not in the wetlands. And then there's a wetland area at the base of the hill, and then the hillside starts up again. If the entire 150 feet is dedicated, that seems to swallow right up to our wetlands, so that there's no opportunity for a trail amenity for us to create within that area for our residents. I know I have a letter from the owner, previous to the owner that sold it to me, from the I believe it was early 80s, in which the city talked about the planned trail going along the river, and they wanted to enter into negotiations with him. To my knowledge, the trail is still unfunded, unplanned, and isn't ready to go. We really want to provide for the city or the other agencies that would be in charge of the trail. I have no problem. I think the trail would be a great amenity. I just feel it could be accommodated in the 75 feet, and that allows us some freedom to use that land and maintain that land within our development. So I'm just looking to get with staff and see what we could negotiate and possibly some sort of compromise. I don't think it's an insurmountable issue in the least.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Grasser.
you.
Appreciate it. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to staff report and let you know if we have any questions. Mr. Franzen, you want to give us a staff report, please?
Mr. Chairman, we're recommending approval according to the recommendations on page 2 of the staff report. If you look under, there's some items to be completed prior to City Council. The first 3 items, A, B, and C, I would say these are minor adjustments to the plan and technical in nature. And item D, Mr. Grasser had addressed the Planning Commission specifically to talk about the 150-foot width and whether or not it could be 75 feet. I think if you have questions about how we arrived at that width requirement and why we need that amount of space, I believe that Stuart Fox would be best equipped to be able to respond to your questions in that area.
Thank you. Mr. Fox, I know we'll probably get to it at some point, so you want to just kick this off and tell us your opinion and kind of where you got to from that? Please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Since it seems to be one of the large topics. In regards to the property directly to the east, I guess I'll put that kind of to rest, the Vintage. There was negotiations with the property owners that entire outlot was to be dedicated to the city. That has not been done, and the staff does intend on following up with the developer to remind them of their commitment to do that. They wanted to do it as a charitable donation. So we will own the entire outlot to the east, which is considerably larger than 150 feet in width. In regards to the Walnut Ridge, the situation there was a matter of ownership of various parcels within there, and so we only ended up with 75 feet. Where this entire trail system came from, it's in our park and open space plan, and it was perceived to be a joint project with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had funds back in the 1980s. They did acquire several properties up and down the Minnesota River as property owners wished to sell property and as the federal agency had funding to purchase it. Those funds dried up, and so it's basically sat on the books as a to be completed sometime in the future. We have a lot of trails throughout the city that are in that same category, a lot of our nature trails within the conservation areas. In regards to do we need 150 feet, do we need 75 feet, the situation down there is we could certainly draw a line that would, earmark where the trail would best be suited. That's something we could certainly work out with the developer. The thing was we were figuring that rather than spending a lot of expense and a lot of time to actually earmark this, that high portion along the river would be best suited for location of the trail. Plus, the width of it would allow us to meander around the trees without having to take trees out if it came to a pinch point. So that was something that was looked at because, again, the property to the one side did have 150 feet. We don't want to zipper the property line and be going back and forth. We felt it was best to start to straighten that out and rather than start to pinch it narrow and then widen it out again.
So just to be clear, as of right now, there's no current funding for this trail.
There is no current funding for this trail, and as you could imagine, when we start going up and down the corridor, I mean, there's properties directly to the, it would be to the east of the Vintage that, again, are in private ownership. So, in terms of how this trail would come about, this might be a 10-year, might be a 20-year, we don't know. There has been some indications from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that they're entering into negotiations for some of the lower properties at Minnesota River, but that hasn't been made, firm in terms of what types of things they're looking at. But there are a number of properties that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is interested in acquiring to basically continue that open space from Fort Snelling all the way down to Jordan and Belle Plaine along the Minnesota River.
And who Who at this time would maintain those trails, or even if the trail isn't built yet, if we were to take possession of that land, who maintains that?
Well, if the city had ownership of the trail, we'd be responsible for maintaining the property. But again, being landlocked and not being able to get to it, we'd have to come across private property to maintain it. Currently, the parcels that are on either side are basically in a status of, natural. There is no. We don't have diseased elm trees down there, and we certainly aren't going down there looking for things like buckthorn.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Commissioners, what other questions do you have or concerns at all?
The only other question I had was really, I'm not quite sure I understand the role of the invasive species that were mentioned before and what impact they might have on this.
Well, in terms of invasive species, there's only a certain number of trees and plants are identified as needing to be controlled, and they're under the noxious weed ordinance. Even things like buckthorn are listed as invasive, but there is no ordinance, either city, county, or state, that says you have to maintain that. There's certainly recommendations to try and control it, especially if you have like an upland hardwood forest. You want to control things like buckthorn. We do that, for instance, in the Prairie Bluff Conservation Area, those types of things. Things like leafy spurge, that's an invasive species, but it's usually in the prairie areas. So we are mandated to control invasive species when they are considered noxious by state statute.
Okay, thank you.
Jerry, do you have a question?
Yeah, just kind of a follow-up on that. If the property owners wanted to control buckthorn or something in that area, could they go down to the easement? Because it is still their property, and it's an undeveloped easement at that time.
If it's their property, they're certainly welcome to control it. If it's city property, we do have a process where we want to make sure that they are indeed controlling or removing something that is invasive. We work with homeowners and other people if they want to control those types of things, even though it's a city land parcel. We have a process. We just don't allow people to go in there and suddenly start clearing things, because it becomes a question is who's gaining the view, or who's gaining the best benefit from it, or and what did they actually remove.
But if this is just an easement and it's undeveloped by the city, then it is the property owner's access.
If it's an outlot, it would be owned by the city.
Okay. I'm a little confused then. Is the easement on the outlot, or is the easement on these property owners' property? Where is this easement for the...
I'm not sure where he's talking about the easement. I believe what we were talking about was outlot A that would be deeded to the city for future trail corridor. If they want to maintain the other area, the slopes and those types of things as part of their I don't know if it's going to be an association or a group that's going to be maintaining it, they could certainly maintain their property as they saw fit.
Okay. I misunderstood that the city would take ownership of this 150-foot strip or whatever it is. It wouldn't really be an easement. Okay.
It would be ownership, not easement.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, are there any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. So how would the access for the city to be able to maintain that potential ownership of the outlots, whether it be 75 feet or 150 feet wide, where would that access? Is that an easement that they're referring to then?
Well, I believe the easement he's talking about is the easement for the people that live on would live on the upper lots to be able to go down to the very bottom. Our access currently right now, the closest access would be in the James A. Brown Conservation Area, which is considerably west. That almost touches Riverview Road by the Spyglass area. And the idea is, to pick up these land parcels along the Minnesota River as they become available, so that you could, have a trail or a public walking area. These would be nature trails. You wouldn't be able to pave a trail down there because it's subject to flooding, so it would be more of a nature type trail, types of things that maybe you might see over at like Fort Snelling and some of those lowland trails that basically are marked with wooden posts. You couldn't pave a trail in there and maintain it.
Okay. Another question, kind of related. Did the city have an idea of what elevation they were thinking of placing soft trail system there? Do they have an elevation in mind?
Be at the highest point of that particular landmass because it's rather pronounced. I mean, what's happened is the river is pushed up from the riverside. It's a rather pronounced. I call it a hump or a bump along that river's edge. And then the wetland they were referring to is on the back side or on the land side of it. There's kind of a lowland area in there.
Commissioners, any other questions? One that kind of popped up in my mind, when you look at the lot sizes, some of them were, I think I saw one that was 20,000 square feet and one that was over 300,000 square feet. Is that a concern to anybody? I know that the largest one obviously is for the homeowner, and that was on there. But some of them, there's some varying sizes in there, and I don't know if that's a concern or not. Go ahead.
Not to me. I see that there's going to be the 3 lots along the bluff that are going to be extremely expensive and extremely big homes, and then there's going to be 6 lots on either side of the road accessing it that are going to be extremely nice houses on kind of expensive lots.
Right.
And so there's not going to be a huge difference. It's going to be extremely nice no matter where you go.
Just wanted to point that out.
Yep.
Okay. I don't see any other concerns. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Can I just make one
Yes,
one
please
comment
go
about
ahead. Please go ahead.
the width?
Yeah.
Rather than specifically stating here that it's 150 feet, could we say that the staff and the proponent have continuing discussions about defining what the width of the outlot will be?
I would be in approval of that kind of thing. I'm not necessarily certain 150 feet is necessary, but it's
Right.
something like that along the lines that you're saying.
I too agree. I think a little give and take and some discussion would be good.
Okay. That's fine.
It could be that it just needs to be a little more survey work done or something to be more specific on exactly where attributes are that need to be worked around or whatever. And
Right.
so
Okay.
I think they should be able to do that.
Seeing that this is a public hearing, is there anyone out in the audience that has any comments or concerns? If so, now would be the time. Okay. Not seeing any. With that being said, and with the continuing discussion about that outlot, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, move to recommend approval of the zoning district change from rural to R1-13.5 on 23 acres and preliminary plat of 23 acres into 10 lots based on plan stamp dated September 13th, 2012, and the staff report dated September 21st, 2012, with one revision to the staff report that the staff and the project proponent will meet to have further discussions about the width of outlots A, B, and C and come to an agreement on the width of those outlots.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. You move forward with the project. Thank you very much. Commissioners, moving along, we have a continued item for tonight. The next agenda item is MAC Development Site by the Metropolitan Airport Commission. The location is Flying Cloud Airport. The request is for a text amendment of Chapter 3 of the city's comprehensive guide plan, which will identify airport commercial and airport office zoning for the proposed parcels, which are currently a guided airport. The second is a text amendment of Chapter 5 of the city's comprehensive guide plan relating to safety zones, and the last one is a text amendment to Chapter 11 of the city code to create airport office and airport commercial zoning districts. With that being said, will the proponent of the project please come forward and tell us a little bit about your project?
Actually, that's us.
Oh, it is you. It is you. Very good.
Or me, I should say.
Or you. Thank you, Mr. Franson.
Before I get into the presentation, I just want to let everybody know, including the commission, that I received an email from the residents of the Tree Farm in North Bluffs neighborhood, submitted by John Fedora. That came in last night. Printed out a copy that's in front of you. Sent a copy of that to Mac this morning. I got a response from John that he thought that some residents from the neighborhood would be here to present this email. I'm not sure if that's the case. I guess we do have a potential volunteer out there, and that can occur as part of the public hearing comments.
Mr. Franklin, can I ask a question? Was the additional items, was that included with the letter, or is that a separate item? Was the whole packet one?
This is all one item.
Got it, thank you.
Okay. Just wait for the crowd noise to go down just a bit.
Yeah, would someone mind closing the door in the back, please? Thank you. Okay.
It's probably going to get colder in here when we close the doors, so we want to open that up a little bit.
We'll take
We
our chances.
talked about this project at the last meeting. We didn't have a quorum.
Right.
But we thought it was a good idea to have a presentation by the city attorney and the city staff, and I'm not going to go over the full-blown presentation, but I will want to talk a little bit about the length of the process and the different steps that we're doing, and then I'm going to bring it back specifically to the 3 items that are in front of the commission for your action tonight. Back in December of 2010, the city and MAC entered this memorandum of understanding, and it outlined a process for review of development parcels at the airport. And it's a 3-step process. The first step starts at the Planning Commission and City Council, where we're taking a look at putting together the regulatory tools in place so that we can evaluate rezoning and site plans later on. Assuming that the City Council approves the 3 actions that are on this commission meeting tonight, then MAC would start the next series of public hearings, one at the commission and the council, where we will have an individual hearing for each one of the 6 parcels. At that time, they'll have a concept drawing showing building or buildings so we can see what their intentions are.
So just to be clear, you're saying that we will have an individual meeting to this commission on each of those, is it 6?
Yes,
6
I'm
parcels?
assuming at this point that we would have one planning commission meeting devoted to 6 public hearings and deal with them all in the same night.
Got it, but
they
they'll be
have-
individual-
They have to be individual hearings.
Understood.
Because you need to take a separate action on each one of those.
Understood.
If we get through that process and the council approves that, the next phase is site plan review. And that's typically what you do for commercial and office developments, where you look at the landscape plans, the drainage plans, the building materials, the landscaping, the screening, the access, and the parking requirements. That time period is going to be a little bit unknown because it's dependent upon when MAC enters into an agreement with a developer to come in and actually do a project. So the first 2 steps are going to happen relatively one right after the other. The site plans could come in all at once. They could come in one at a time. They could come in over a period of years, just to let you know. But the whole point of this process is there's going to be at least 2 times that the residents in the city will have a chance to be in front of the commission and council to talk about everything that's going on relative to the development parcels. In front of you this evening, there's 3 individual requests. The first one is amending Chapter 3. That's the land use chapter. And in that chapter, we identify all the land use types in Eden Prairie: low density, medium, high density, commercial, office, and industrial, and we have airport. And in each one of these land use categories, we identify a corresponding zoning district for implementation. Much like Bellary this evening was guided low density residential, and the guide plan would say R113.5 is a regulatory tool for implementing low density residential. So we're going to add in the text, airport, commercial, and airport office as the appropriate zoning districts for regulating future airport office and airport commercial. We also have a graphic where we identify the parcels. The second text amendment is related to Chapter 5, Transportation. We have safety zones that are identified on the map for planning purposes. These safety zones don't exist legally at this point. That only happens after a process has been completed where the Commissioner of Transportation reviews the Joint Airport Zoning Board draft ordinance, which our City Council said was okay to ship to the Commissioner. Once he rules on that, it comes back to JASB for adoption and the City Council for adoption, and at that point, they're in place. Why do we have safety zones in Chapter 5? It's for the purpose of planning and zoning our community. because there's three different types of zone. There's the A zone, which you can't build anything in. The B zone is limited development. And the C zone is practically the rest of the city, and that's only related to height restrictions. The closer you are to the airport, the shorter the buildings have to be, the farther you get away, the buildings that can be taller. In the existing condition in our comp plan and the after condition, the total area that's encompassing A, B, and C is about the same. In the after condition, the A zone gets smaller, which is the runway protection zone established by the Federal Aviation Administration, I think that's what they call it, where you can't build anything. So the B zone gets a little bit bigger, so there's a little bit more room in the limited development category. The last action in front of the Planning Commission is amending Chapter 11. That's the zoning code. We identify airport commercial and airport office as the zoning districts, and we're creating standards that go with that. Airport office standards are the same standards as the office zoning district. So you look at any office building that's been built in town, that's the same standard. It's a brick and glass building, lots of landscaping, lots of screening. The airport commercial standards are the same as our commercial districts, brick and glass buildings, lots of landscaping, etc. The only difference in the airport commercial district, and we are going to do this sometime next year, is add this requirement to all of our commercial districts. It's related to convenience gas. And the reason we're doing this is we want to figure out a way in which you could put convenience gas on the airport and make it fit in better with the residential setting. So we're trying to minimize the impacts of light, so we have lower light levels. We're trying to minimize the visual impact of looking at the gas pump, so we have a requirement to have the building towards the roads and the gas pumps towards the back, and a bunch of other sort of quality control issues to make them attractive and make them of a residential character that fits in better.
And that would be following our city code anyways, is that correct?
It would be. I mean, we have these items in a qualitative matter in our site plan review section. It's just that we're making this a little bit more specific in the airport commercial district. Those standards for airport commercial, we are going to add to all of our other commercial districts. So we're treating all of our commercial properties in a fair and equitable manner relative to convenience gas.
Okay.
So the staff recommendation at this point is for approval of the text amendment to Chapter 3, the text amendment to Chapter 5, and the text amendment to Chapter 11.
Do we anticipate anyone from the Metropolitan Airport Commission to be present at any of these meetings?
Actually, we do have 3 representatives from the Metropolitan Airports Commission that are sitting in the front row to the right. And if there are some specific questions you have, feel free to ask them.
Okay, very good. Commissioners, well, you know what, before we start with that, Mr. Franz, can you give the audience just a little back history of how this whole thing came apart, or how it came about, I guess I should say? Excuse me.
The MOU came about in regards to a fundamental question. Who has the right to control development on the airport property? Our position was that as long as we're not interfering with the normal operation of the airport, in other words, we're not going to mess around with the hangars, the runways, any of their private businesses out there, anything that is not related to the day-to-day operations of the airport, we felt we had zoning and guide plan approval over other commercial and office businesses out here. The MAT took a different position that said we don't agree with that. We could go to court and have a court decide that. That would take a long time. That would be very costly. But we felt it's probably better to work in a cooperative manner, because what was important to the city was allowing the commission and the council and the people that live around the area to have some input into what happens on these specific parcels. So what was important to us would be to go through the guide plan change, the rezoning, and the site plan review. If we left it up to the court and the court decided that MAT could just do what they wanted, we would have no control over the outcome. Right. This way, at the least, we'll have some control over how much. We'll have very specific control in what it looks like. So we're not going to have a tip-up concrete panel building that looks like a warehouse that's in our industrial districts. If you look at the C.H. Robinson buildings that are out by the airport, those are brick and glass buildings with lots of landscaping. That's exactly our expectation. That is the exact requirement that we would have for any office building built on any of the office parcels that are out. And for the commercial properties, take the best of the commercial properties that you've all looked at over the last 5 or 6 years. That's our expectation.
Right, so just to be clear and to kind of summarize, the Metropolitan Airport Commission came to us and kind of told us being the city,
We'd like to develop.
came to us and said we'd like to develop and kind of laid out the plan. And then we went into negotiations with them to be able to say, look, we'd like to be able to look at that plan and be able to give the citizens of Eden Prairie an opportunity to look at that plan and to be able to give us their feedback on that plan. So that's what I wanted to kind of make clear to everyone in the audience of kind of how this process came about and kind of what we're trying to do to all work together so that your voices could be heard. So with that being said, Commissioners, I'll give you first crack on any questions that you may have as you read through this packet and kind of understand a little bit more about it and the background behind it.
Yeah, I guess I would just start with trying to understand in a little more detail the objectives here, what we're trying to get done. I understand the gasoline convenience component of it. I understand there's an office component and so on, but to what degree, are there other components that you have quite a bit of detail about that you're interested in building eventually in the 6 parcels? I don't know how far that planning has gone, so just more background, really.
Can you state your name for city record?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Eric Johnson with the Metropolitan Airports Commission.
Thank you.
To answer the question, the MAC is interested in developing parcels to help generate more revenue for the operation of the airport. And as the initial phases of this, as we indicated, we started meeting with the city to talk about what potential options there were and what the city saw as some potential development opportunities that would fit in with the area around there. And at this point, working through the process with the city, we've had some initial discussions with some developers just from a very vague discussion about what some potentials were. We wanted to work through this process to get the zoning piece squared away. That way we knew what was in our hand to be able to go talk to a developer what the possibilities were. And at that point, we'll come back with a better plan once we have some idea of what that is and go forward from there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
And thank you for being here tonight. I do appreciate it. Jerry, go ahead.
First of all, a question for Mr. Franzen. The area down by parcel number 6, there's 2 pieces of land just to the north of there. What are those currently zoned as, and what is the flexibility of zoning changes to those 2 pieces of property? I think it's 2 large residential pieces.
There are 2 large residential pieces that are currently guided low-density residential. We had talked in our comprehensive plan about the potential for that property either remaining as residential because there is a stub street that comes in from the residential to the east, but if it was developed as office without a road connection into the residential, that might be a better fit next to the airport rather than building more houses on the parcels to the north.
Okay. Because then for the Metropolitan Airport Commission, if those 2 parcels to the north of your Zone 6 or your parcel number 6 remain as they currently are, how would you plan to access your parcel? Would you drive across airport property from the west, or would you anticipate that you'd gain some sort of access through other residential properties, or how would you get to your property?
Can you please state your name for city record, too? Thank you.
Good evening, Bridget Rafe, Metropolitan Airports Commission. You got the tag team tonight. So, what we're envisioning is that the access would come from the west through airport property off of Pioneer Trail, that we would not be looking for any type of easement or access from anybody else's parcels in order to get to this development area.
Okay. I just find that really interesting because over the last few years, we've had 2 instances where the City of Eden Prairie has gone to the Metropolitan Airport Commission and asked about putting roads on airport property, and we were turned down. One was to do an emergency access or second form of egress from Prospect Road to, for improved safety for Hennepin Village. And that was supposedly turned down after one phone call. And then the second time was more recently that there's a temporary access between Eden Prairie Road and Sky Lane to the west of the airport, which is a temporary construction access, which I understand we were told, well, you know, construction is construction and now you can't have it anymore. So it's really easy for you folks to just go across this property. It's no concern to airport safety, but these other ones were?
Mr. Chairman and Commission members, I am familiar with both of the requests that the city had, and it is based on the type of runway approach and the exact location, basically, where we were talking about and where the city wanted to be. The runway approach that we're talking about on the east side of the airport is much less significant than the one on the west side near Sky Lane and our FAA-owned approach lighting system, and we had some other concerns about being in that particular runway approach.
Okay.
And if, to add on to that, if you look in your packets, there is a map that was provided that identifies the Zone A and Zone B locations. And if you look at those, there is one runway end that has a much larger runway protection zone in Zone A than all the others. That's the runway end that we were talking about. And so it's a precision approach runway. Pilots can use it when the weather gets bad, and when the cloud deck gets lower, when it gets foggier. That's the runway end that they need to use, and that's why that safety area is much larger, because they're using it in more inclement weather.
Okay.
And all those things tie together for why you don't want roads in that particular location.
That still doesn't really address the Hennepin Village component, though. That takes care of the road between Eden Prairie Road and Sky Lane. But the Hennepin Village was an area to come off of Prospect Road to the north, so that there would be no need to, a consideration for not building a bridge across the creek area.
Mr. Chairman and Commission members, my recollection is that they were both in the same area, so if you'd like to take the discussion offline, we can certainly talk about the different
Sure.
locations and make sure I'm on the same page with you.
Okay. Then just one more question for you. What's the property tax situation for these properties? Will you be paying property tax for the developments on these parcels just like any other parcel in the city of Eden Prairie?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, MAC land is exempt from taxes, but our hangar owners pay property taxes, and so would any of our developments would pay county and city taxes just like anybody else. It's just the land itself MAC doesn't pay taxes for. But any of the improvements that are made on that land, they would pay taxes for.
Okay, city, county, school?
Yes.
Everything, but not on the value of the land?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can you state your name, too, for city record, please? I'm sorry I didn't catch your name.
Bridget Reef.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You know,
Mr. Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm going to reiterate what you said, and what you said a little earlier. And I think it's important that we understand as a body here and as a city that what we're voting on tonight, or what's in front of the Planning Commission tonight, is the mechanism to get the public hearing process to be a viable process for MAC development.
Right.
And I think that it's important for us tonight to keep a focus on that. And I know there are a lot of questions, I'm sure, from the audience and obviously from the Planning Commission as well, about the specific parcels and the development on the specific parcels. And to me, the good news is we're laying the groundwork tonight to be able to have those hearings in depth in the future and get input on each one of those. So I just wanted to kind of state that, and Mr. Franzen or Mr. Chairman or other commission members, if I'm mistaken in my perception, and there, please tell me now, but I think it's important that we really focus on putting the framework in place so that as we go forward, we will have, how shall I say, active discussions regarding the development potential and the city and citizens' input into that.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the MAC and their willingness to be able to come and work with the City of Eden Prairie as a team in order to come to a resolution that everyone can be happy with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the MAC is showing a good faith, as the city is, to work together in the best interest of everybody, and that's fantastic. And let's put the structure in place so that we can really have that moving forward.
Agreed. So with that being said, is there anyone out in the audience that has any concerns or any specific questions about the project that's in front of us this evening? If so, now would be the time to come forward.
Yeah, do you want to come forward and talk a little bit about the information that was provided?
And if we could do one at a time, that would be great. And then, does he? You can sit very close to him. How's that? And then, would you please state your name and spell your last name for city record, please?
Yep. So my name is Rick DeJong, D-E-J-O-N-G. Live at 9756 Tree Farm Road, and we've got a few neighbors here. So what I'm going to project here is something that our neighbor John Fedora was kind enough to put together as a fairly complete data package. And so I'm stepping in for him tonight. He's out of town, so I'll run through his document. He's got 8 points that I'll run through that are considerations and arguments against developing Parcel 6, but rather developing the property directly west of Parcel 6. So I'll run through that. Zoom in a little bit.
Mr. DeJong, I'm assuming that that is the packet that is in front of us, which we received as well?
I think so. If that's the email that was sent.
This is this one?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so I'll jump over to the first page. And for the audience, it's going to be a little hard to see, but so the first point was, now as I mentioned, there's 8 points here. Lack of access, and this was brought up a little bit earlier, is just the rationale for developing Parcel 6 and the access to get to Parcel 6 is a consideration we'd like to be taken into account here, as the piece of land west of that will be easier to access for commercial use. Number 2, lack of visibility. I'll show you some pictures coming up here on the next page. Part of Parcel 6, there's say hills and valleys that if you develop or put a building in one of these valleys or on one of these hills, it's not going to be visible from Pioneer Trail. And so I think anyone doing commercial business or renting a space is going to want to have visibility from a main road as far as customers finding them and doing business with them. So can everybody hear me okay? Because I can hear my voice coming in and out. Okay.
Yep, we're fine.
All right. The next item is terrain, and that's what I was mentioning. It's going to be, I'll try to point out some of the pictures here. The terrain point is just, as I was mentioning, is the rolling hills, the valley, are going to make it difficult to put a building or buildings in a spot that are easily accessible and visible from the road. If you look here, this is, I'll point at this hill, this here, this is, without reading through the text, this is just partway up the hill looking down into the residence that is directly east of the land. Let me find another, I think there's another, here. Now here's another spot. Now this one I think is a good example of this is at a, I don't know if it's a high point or low point. Does anybody know? Neighbors?
That's down below.
Down below? Okay. The point here is that you can't see Pioneer Trail from this portion, and a good portion of the land is in this lower lying area. So, anybody else have any points you want to make?
Well, the culvert issue is probably...
Yep, that's coming up.
All right.
So I think one thing, too, John was here last time, and he states in his data package that he would like to have the Planning Commission and the MAC representatives out and do a walk through this area so you can see for yourselves what that land looks like, both from the planning and the how much sense it makes to put buildings there, but also just the beauty of the area. And we'll get to that, too. There's all kinds of wildlife back there that I think speak to not developing Parcel 6. So moving on to the next point, tree replacement. So there's a section of one of the city ordinances talking about, I guess, trees that are taken out have to be replaced in some like manner. If you guys take the opportunity to do a walkthrough of the area, you'll see that it's heavily treed. It's just a beautiful area. So John's point with this is that if a whole lot of trees come out to make room for buildings, there's going to be a whole lot of money put in to get trees back to the point of meeting the city ordinance. Moving to the next page, wetlands. So I believe it's kind of the southeast corner that parcel 6 runs into appears to be a wetland. And once again, a walkthrough would show you this. I don't know if there's any other points to make with that. Moving on to the next item, the buffer or transition property to the residential area. We've got residences to the north and to the east of this parcel 6. When you throw in the buffer zone in consideration with all these other points, it's just one more consideration or one more reason that, in our view, it just doesn't make sense to develop parcel 6, but rather move the development further west. Wildlife habitat is, I mentioned already, we commonly have turkeys, coyotes, deer, all kinds of birds, animals, some good and some bad, running through there. It's just a very pretty area, and a lot of wildlife use that area back there. Moving to the last item here, stormwater culvert. So John, in doing his due diligence here and taking the photographs that you see, came across a culvert that is actually, if we jump back, I'll try to point out this picture just for your reference. Which picture is it where he's standing on the culvert? Dan, do you remember?
I think I had to take that one out.
Page 6.
Page 6?
Looks like a purple line, purple dotted line.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing it, but I know it's in there.
Yeah. It's right here.
Identified?
Well, yeah, it runs right through here.
Oh, okay, okay.
You might be
All
able
right.
to see it on your
So
phone.
here, yeah, so for everybody, this purple dotted line is the culvert. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So, but John's point with that is that the easement that's required for that culvert may create some restrictions or some issues that have to be worked around in order to develop that property. So once again, just another consideration to look at as to whether or not parcel 6 makes sense for development, and if that can sway the decision to move the development further west. And anything else? Team, neighbors?
I don't think so. Dan Sheehan, 9836 Tree Farm Road. Again, our point here is again, this piece of property is the one that abuts to residential area. We're not telling the MAC what to do with their own property. We're just really asking, does it make sense to do the development there? Is there a possibility to move that development further to the west in a more desirable area? So it's really, we're not against the development, but we're here to talk to you about our particular area, and hopefully we can come to a compromise.
And you're talking specifically about parcel number 6, is that correct?
Correct.
Very good. Okay, anything else, gentlemen? Great. Thank you very much for your time. Is there anybody else out in the audience that has any other comments or concerns? Yes, sir, please. Come forward. Can you tell us your name and spell your last name for us?
Yes, Dan O'Neill. With my fiance, we own property at 12476 Jasper Lane, so it is also in relation to parcel 6. And I have got a couple of points. I come from a background of development, so I've sat in front of a number of planning commissions in a very similar manner, trying to get property entitled. And my big fear here is that once this property is entitled, once it is zonable, And I can't tell from the meeting tonight if this is to zone the property or if it's to create the zoning. And I can't tell that from the, so that is a question to you guys. I don't know if you answer it, or if you just take that question. I can't tell if this is zoning this property or if this is just their proposed where they would zone this in a future public hearing.
Mr. France, you want to jump in and answer that question real quick?
We're creating the zoning districts and the regulatory tools within the district. Subsequent to this, if the council decides to amend the comp plan and amend the zoning, then we go through public hearings where there's an actual rezoning request from the present zoning to office. And then we go through that public hearing process. We get to come back in front of this commission and then also in front of the city council to talk about the rezoning of the property and where buildings should or should not be on these properties.
So the comp plan, the three amendments or the three decisions that are being reached tonight in no way give explicit or implicit zoning, even though the MAC has said, here's what we'd like to do for commercial and here's what we'd like to do for office. The two don't correlate. They're mutually exclusive items?
Yes, at this point.
Okay. That would seem to be to at least allow this council here, because again, as a developer, you can move a lot of dirt and create any space that you want. And again, everything can be done for a cost. I also wonder, has there been either an environmental impact statement or an environmental assessment worksheet done either on this area previously, or is that contemplated in your comp plan?
You'd have to meet certain thresholds that are part of state law for a number of units or square feet of development, and we're not anywhere near close to those thresholds, so they wouldn't meet any mandatory EAW or environmental impact statement categories.
And so that would be something that if I were on your side, from working with the MAC, there is a lot of environmental impact out there, as was just stated earlier by the two gentlemen. The significant impact that can be made by moving a lot of dirt out there and removing a lot of trees and taking a lot of slope down could create a beautiful area way off of Pioneer Trail for an office building. That would seem to be very incongruent with zoning, where you take single-family homes and then you create some buffer between that and either office or commercial. It would seem to be very incongruent with what I've seen from other comp plans in terms of what one would put in there. I mean, it seems like a logical place on the back side, and you have to walk the site. I just walked it last night. The entire back side of this in parcel 6 is sloped. There's only a very small sliver at the very top on the very western side of 6. And as the two gentlemen just mentioned, then there are two parcels owned by the MAC that are not contemplated in this, at least in the zoning of these 6 parcels. There's a very flat area that's adjacent to Pioneer Trail. That seems strange that that's not included in the request, although, again, I don't understand all of the safety zones, and maybe there's a very good safety reason for it. But it seems like you could run a 1,000-foot road off a Pioneer Trail, and you could put a beautiful office building that wouldn't have a lot of traffic from Pioneer Trail worried about traffic. So as far as access and egress, as a developer, I'd want to put an office building back there, because all you're looking up to is wetlands and single-family homes in your backyard, and that's a beautiful place to have an office building. So I would just, it's not a caution to the Planning Commission, because you guys know what you're doing. It's just that in this entitlement process, every step gives less and less for the homeowners to do anything about, and knowing that there's no environmental impact statement or environmental assessment worksheet capabilities that the city could put to the developer or the MAC really seems to leave a lot of opportunity out there to pretty much do whatever you'd like to do to put an office building in. So I just share my observations there based on being on the other side of the fence before.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Is there anybody else out in the audience that has any concerns or questions? Yes, sir. Please come forward. Again, state your name, spell your last name, and your address for
My name
city.
is
Thank you.
Chris Fund with 9850 Eaton Prairie Road. Last name is Bunn, B-U-N-N. Two questions, and kind of both groups. It seems like a lot of this is all being predicated on the increasing of either property tax or revenue for the NAC, and it's all required to reduce the safety zones have to be reduced to accommodate that. Is that frequently done where you'll reduce the existing safety zones to accommodate additional revenue? That's a question to both, I guess, the city as well as the back.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Franzen, you want to try to tackle that one?
I would say that in a review of the parcel, it's not driven by the future revenue that could be generated by this. I sat in on several meetings as a staff representative to the Joint Airport Zoning Board, and we did several analysis of the B zone from no development up to a lot of development. And even on the very high end of the development, it's less than 1% of the total value of the city that you might actually generate in terms of value of the property. So, yeah, there is some money that you might capture if you're able to develop every square inch of the B zone, but it's a very small percentage. Our concern is about, are these development sites, what portions of these sites are appropriate for development, what parts of the sites are not appropriate for development. And in looking at its development potential, we have to look on its impact on city sewer and water. Because the building developments can be relatively limited, we're not going to have to redo our sewer and water system. We will take a look at road analysis on any commercial office development. We look at roads and intersections to see if there is enough of a change between the existing condition and the after condition that might say, put in a signal, put in a turn lane, widen the road. It has to work in terms of the amount of traffic that you might anticipate for the development. All of the things that he's talked about, the previous gentleman talked about, the gentleman before that, are all parts of the analysis that we have to do when we look at the rezoning of the parcels. If you look at all of the attachments that John Fedor put together, these are the attachments that I gave to John based upon a conversation I had with this property when he was asking about what are all the regulatory tools the city has for reviewing development. And we want to make sure that the city applies those rules in a uniform and a fair manner as you're looking at the development potential of not just the property and their neighborhood, but all the properties as well. And so from an environmental standpoint, you look at our tree ordinance, our wetland ordinance, our shoreline ordinance, our floodplain ordinance, our slope ground ordinances, we have a very good handle on what to analyze and what to mitigate. In fact, the things that were in environmental impact statements and environmental assessment worksheets in the 70s predated a lot of the environmental rules that all the cities across the Twin City area either decided to adopt on their own or because of some federal action, the Clean Water Act, the State Shoreline Ordinance, so we have the regulatory tools to look at the environmental part of it. We go a step further, perhaps, than other cities, that we regulate the review of site plans from a quantitative standpoint and a qualitative standpoint. And one of the key things in the site plan review, when you have a difference in the land use, as in this case office next to residential, it does talk about how you develop a transition. It might be saving the landform, it might be smaller buildings, it might be shorter buildings, it might be bigger setbacks. This was done to try and make some projects or some land uses that might work next to residential fit in better. And one of the reasons we saw these two office sites as potential sites is that office next to residential, if you don't have traffic going through the neighborhood, and you do a nice development plan, they're generally pretty good neighbors because they're pretty much active from 7 in the morning to 7 at night, and it's quiet at the evening. And if you do the building design right and the landscaping right, tree preservation right, it can become a good fit. So these are all kind of the things that we're going to have to do when we get into the rezoning look at each of the parcels and the site plan look at each of the parcels.
Very good. I think, Jared, do you have one other comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I agree with what John commented on earlier about what our position here is tonight or what we're really talking about here tonight. But I do have a concern that if we do amend the comprehensive guide plan based on this document that shows Zone 6 where it's currently shown, that then when we get to the zoning component, you can anticipate there's going to be a lot of discussion, and it's going to be very difficult discussion for everyone involved. And if there's the potential that you could move Zone 6, Parcel 6, to the west, like people are suggesting here, if we could do that right up front and have that be the component that's in the guide plan now, I think it will give you a lot more flexibility and a lot better opportunity to actually do something there that you're going to find to be a successful project for MAC. Because otherwise, if you stick with it the way it is here, it's going to be a really difficult process for all of us. And if there's some way that you can make it work with your safety zones to move that to the west, we can do that now, or we can continue it tonight. You can make the revisions. We'll probably approve it later on, and everyone will be off in a very positive way. So just a comment. Any reaction to that from Mac?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the western boundary of Parcel 6 is determined by our VOR radar that we have located off the ends of the runway, and that antenna structure has a critical area around it at an extent of a 1,000-foot radius. And so the western boundary of Parcel 6 lines up with that 1,000-foot boundary. And so there are significant limitations within that VOR critical area that would prevent any type of structures.
I see.
So you kind of started, hold on one second, so you basically started with that footprint and worked your way from there, from that 1,000-foot. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jerry. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
The VOR cannot be moved further to the west, or that would create problems for...
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, actually it is very specifically cited. It was constructed there in 2009 as part of the runway extensions when we moved it off the airfield. It does have very significant requirements, and that was the only location around the vicinity of the airport. In the reality, just as a fun fact, it actually serves traffic at the international airport much more so than it does for Flying Cloud. If it were just for Flying Cloud, we actually would have gotten rid of it altogether, because it's sort of a dying type of navigational aid, if you will. But it's a huge service for the international airport, so we had to keep it and put it where we could find a place.
Just one other kind of a side question here. You know, you mentioned that a big portion of this is to increase the revenue stream for support of Flying Cloud Airport and to make it more self-sufficient. What are the landing fees for an aircraft like, you know, a small jet there versus at MSP?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, you'll have to forgive me because I do not know the exact numbers off the top of my head. We just recently adopted a revised ordinance through the Airports Commission where the landing fees at Minneapolis-St. Paul for say a 20,000-pound jet, which you will see at Flying Cloud, the landing fee at Minneapolis is more than it is at Anoka or Flying Cloud and St. Paul, but it's not by much. It's less than $100, I believe. Does that sound right, Eric? For every landing. But any aircraft that comes in and lands there will pay that landing fee as long as they're heavier than 12,500 pounds. That's sort of the breaking line between the single engine, real little guys, right, and the commercial. It's the commercial and the transient people that are coming to this airport from other airports. That's the revenue we're trying to achieve.
So that $100 differential, is that on a $1,000 landing fee versus $900, or is that on a $10,000 landing fee? Well, it's not that much, I know that. But.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, if it's $100 at Flying Cloud, it's probably $150 at Minneapolis-St. Paul. So the difference isn't very significant. MAC actually earns more money off of our fuel flowage fee. So any fuel that's sold at the airport, we gain revenue from that. We gain revenue from tenants who sell their hangar. So we get a piece of that transaction fee. We're sort of taking our pieces where we can and where it makes sense, similar to what cities do when it comes to our airport tenants. And part of the ordinance change earlier this year was to make it much more level all across the board for our 6 airports and the general aviation traffic that does use Minneapolis-St. Paul. And so adoption of the ordinance is actually bringing $1 million more a year from Minneapolis funds into the reliever airport system. So we're already making strides, and this non-aeronautical type of development is just another piece of that big long list of where can we do our best to make the airports as self-sustaining as possible.
Okay, thank you.
I guess because in the public hearing, we did hear some, I thought, some pretty well thought through arguments about, or points about Parcel 6. And people were talking about moving west. Are there opportunities to consolidate some of the property in Parcel 6 into other parcels in the overall plan? I understand it's the second largest parcel in the group, but is there some flexibility to accommodate whatever the goals might have been for Parcel 6 and some of those other parcels scattered about the property?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I believe the answer to that is no. We have 2 parcels that we've identified as potential office parcels, number 2 way on the west and Parcel 6. The other smaller parcels are quite frankly just too small for what we're looking at doing. Parcels 5 and 7 are rather limited in what they can be. More than likely, they might be parking, if nothing else. We're not envisioning large structures on those 2 parcels. Parcel 3 is the convenience store potential parcel that we're looking at. That one, out of all of the parcels, we expect is the most likely to come forward to you once we get to the site plan approval stage, because we do have some interest in that, and that site makes sense. One other note, too, based on some of the comments, I did want the commissioners to know that in addition to this process, we also have a process to go through with the FAA, because they view our land as aeronautical land, and we need to go through a process with them to designate certain parcels as non-aeronautical. And part of that designation comes with a review of the potential environmental impacts. So we will work with the FAA on whether or not we need to do an environmental assessment, or if the development, each on their own, would qualify for what we call a categorical exclusion. But it's a step with the FAA where we actually look at any of the potential impacts, and they have to approve either one of those determinations. So from a state perspective, Mr. Franzen's absolutely correct. We don't meet any EAW thresholds, but from a federal perspective, we do have to look at it. So we can't just go out there and do whatever we want. We do need to take a look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Katie, go ahead.
I guess I kind of had a follow-up question, kind of to try and see if we could figure out some of the residents' concerns with this. I know, Mac, wanting to develop this land, you're wanting to pick land that would be practical and have a likely success rate of actually having it developed. I'm curious if you are also concerned about, some of these items that have come up, as there is a fair amount of terrain, there would be a lot of grading, possible, cut and fill happening, and possible, larger quantities of money spent on creating the site. Was there a process that you went through to select these sites? I know, we've talked about safety a lot as probably the main concern. I'm curious if there were any other steps that you went through to decide on, kind of the size as well as the locations of the site.
He's doing such a good job.
It's his turn next time. All right, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. When we first started looking at non-aeronautical potentials, it was back in 2004 when we were looking at our reliever airports. And the very first thing that we did is we laid out every airport and basically identified any area that was outside of an aircraft operational area. And then from there, started scaling back to, okay, which ones make sense, which airports make sense from a development standpoint. So, for example, we have some parcels out at our Lake Elmo Airport that might be very promising for non-aeronautical development. But the communities around it just really aren't quite at a stage of their own development where it would make sense for us to pursue a whole lot at this point in time. Anoka and Flying Cloud and some of our properties in Bloomington at the Minneapolis Airport rose to the top as the greatest potential, at least at this point in time. And so we have looked at the different parcels. We've weeded out a few. These are the remaining ones for Flying Cloud. And while the previous speaker did indicate you can move a lot of dirt, you can make the site work, we believe that too. You can make the site work. The question is going to be, is there going to be a developer out there who's going to believe that it's beneficial for him or her to actually do that development, make money from that development, and still agree to max lease terms and pay a max lease fee and make it economical? And that's a question we just can't answer right now.
So kind of as a follow-up question, I'm guessing, has there not been anyone that you've potentially spoken with about, hey, if this goes ahead, would you be interested?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, not with regard to this part. I think Parcel 3 is really the primary site that we've had discussions with, and that's been in the last few years.
Okay. One more question. I was trying to kind of lay the parcels on top of the safety zones, and on the western side, I did see that you have Parcel 2 basically inside of Safety Zone A, and the rest of them are all located more either fully outside of safety zones or in Safety Zone B. I'm just kind of curious why that area would be suitable for development and not other areas around the airport within Zones A.
Okay. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, we have a couple of different things going on. There is a city guide plan that shows existing zoning. MAC, we don't believe that any zoning exists because none has ever been adopted. But you have a document that lays out what the state statute indicates through MnDOT Aeronautics are state zones. Under those ordinance definitions for Zone A, Parcel 2 would fall under Zone A. Under the Joint Airport Zoning Board and that ordinance process that MAC and the cities around have sent to the Commissioner of MnDOT, that Zone A is smaller and matches the runway protection zone, which under the federal guidelines is a no-build zone. And so under the JASB ordinance, which is the one to be adopted, it actually falls under Zone B, not Zone A.
So there are actually kind of two different maps that
correct.
show different facts.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Just to make it all that much more confusing.
I did have one more follow-up question for Mr. Franzen to try and answer some of those questions. Do you know if that space, that's been described as a wetland is actually delineated and, seen on maps? And
It shows up on our city map as a wetland, but there hasn't been a delineation done. So if someone decided to do a development on any portion of this property, we would require a wetland delineation. That would be done by a private consultant. Both the city and the watershed district would have to agree that this is in fact the delineation of the wetland, would have to agree that these are in fact the wetland structure setbacks in the wetland buffer zones.
so is it not necessarily 100% that it would be classified as a wetland when that happens? Do you know?
I would say that since we identified on our general map that it is a wetland, it's just a question of is it in the shape that we show? And this is based upon aerial photo analysis, or does it take a different shape? So it could be larger, could be wider, could be thinner.
So there is like a 99.9% chance that, say, this land is developed and maybe some of it does encroach on the wetland, there would need mitigation would need to happen.
We would have a delineation done whether or not there's any grading or development there, because you need to have that to be in compliance with our wetland ordinance, and you want that as part of the city official maps and records.
And then final question, do you know, is there an easement around that culvert?
I don't know the answer to that
You guys
question.
are doing well, too.
I know that I've seen the inlet, which is off of Pioneer Trail, and I've seen the outlet, but I can't tell you exactly where the pipe runs.
I can answer that. When the county rebuilt Pioneer Trail a few years ago, the county put that pipe in and obtained easements for that, which are, I think the easement was pretty significantly wide to accommodate the spoil material as well as regrade it, and that was all purchased by the county.
Do you know, so say we're in, the instance of there is a development before us in that parcel, in that space. Do you know, would the city work with the developer to potentially reroute that, change the, abandon that easement, create a new one, or would it be pretty set in stone that that would be located in that spot?
Well, in many developments, there are situations like this that come up where one of the most recent developments, they had to move a sanitary sewer. So with the development coming in, we would work with them and looking at rerouting it and then vacating one easement and creating another one. So it's fairly common.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jerry, go ahead.
Just one last question or comment, I guess. I guess tonight I am comfortable going ahead with this and what our process is for the evening. But I do still have a question about the property tax situation in that, for building development, frequently the value of the total development is about 20% property and 80% building. And so it just kind of gives an unfair advantage to you as a developer versus other developers in our community, a 20% property tax advantage. And if you actually develop a piece like Parcel 7 here as a parking lot, there's almost no improvements, and so it's a 90% property tax advantage versus somebody else in our community. And just wondering if there's some way that the city can capture some benefit from that, or that MAC can capture some benefit from that, so that you're not using that to put our other developers in the community in a detrimental position relative to your situation, that you have an unfair advantage. Just a question for you.
Let's talk about, I'll give you an example. We had a neighborhood commercial development that was approved by the city about 6 or 7 years ago across the street from Super America. It's the Cleve property. It was a 25,000 square foot commercial development with parking. They wanted to have a little bit more development potential there, but they needed parking. Went to MAC, could not obtain an easement to do it. If they were able to obtain an easement now, that increases the value of the property that's not owned by MAC by having more building on the property, theoretically.
Okay.
So you might take in less for the area that's in the easement area that MAC owns. The city might theoretically gain if it allows more development potential on the property outside of MAC.
I just want to make sure that we're being fair to other developers in our community. That's all.
Well, in regards to how you tax property, there are rules of Hennepin County and rules of the state and rules of the Department of Treasury, and we have to follow those prescribed rules. So whatever we're able to tax, that's what we're able to tax, unless you go in and change the state laws, which is not part of our action plan at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess just one other quick point. I'm basically okay with moving ahead tonight as well, but I thought that some of the points that were raised in these documents were well thought out, and I'd like to just make sure that when we do embark on this process, that these points are talked about individually. I think a fair amount of thought went into them, and I think it would be good for the folks who put this together to hear. There were 9 points in this document, and I think the other gentlemen, both of them, made some interesting points. I want to make sure those don't get lost in future discussion. So thank you for the input. We appreciate it.
And those thoughts will also be part of public record as well. So, Travis, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm comfortable with moving forward with the creation of this vehicle that allows for the city and the MAC to work cohesively with the residents and the business community here. I have a quick question, kind of a curiosity question. Are you undergoing the same processes with the other municipal jurisdictions along the other reliever airports presently, or is this kind of the flagship event to kind of test the waters to see how this is all going out?
Give up way too easy.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, we have several parcels at the Anoka County Blaine Airport that have, they're actually farther along in the process. They've already achieved their FAA approval, and they have achieved the zoning potential with the city of Blaine, short of one parcel. So we're much farther along with Anoka. We have a couple of different parcels up there that would make really good candidates. We're just sort of waiting for that economy to turn around. And then Flying Cloud, yes, is sort of airport number 2. At the same time, we do have some progress with some of the parcels in Bloomington. They have a little bit different FAA feel to them for several reasons. But these are the 3 airports that we're trying to move forward with first.
Thank you.
I did have one more question for you. I'm just kind of a follow-up curiosity. Did the FAA have you do kind of like an environmental assessment with those sites?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, what we did with the Anoka parcels, we did have a number of them had wetlands on the site and threatened and endangered species as well. We have 3 different plant species up at our airport in Anoka that we have the pleasure to protect. And so what we did for those parcels is we actually segregated out any of the wetland and plant areas from any leasable areas. And so the development, should they occur, wouldn't impact the wetlands. Here at Flying Cloud, for this particular parcel, we would likely look at the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Please come forward. Can you tell us your name and spell your last name for city record, please? Thank you.
My name is Steve Lutz, Lutz, resident in Tree Farm Road. And I guess I will admit that I'm fully naive to all the knowledge that you guys have and that Mr. Franzen has. I'm a little unclear what, I've sat and I've listened and I appreciate Matt coming. I guess I'm a little unclear what is going to happen here if you guys choose to pass the zoning law, and it's my own naivety. So I have a question about that, and then there's 2 other questions I kind of have that just kind of vaguely kind of popped up and then disappeared. The one gentleman from MAC, and I appreciate you coming over, you did say when you stood up here that you had some vague conversations with developers. Would you be willing to elucidate at all what those kind of entail? Because I think that's important, perhaps for you people to know, definitely for us to know as residents, because we're all sitting there thinking, what is the structure going to be that's suddenly going to pop up, out our front door? And we don't know. And if you'd be willing to elucidate that, I think that perhaps would settle some of our fears. I think the question about moving, west from Zone 6 or Parcel 6, I understood the radar thing, but then it seemed like that conflicted with the argument of access. If you're going to access, you're going to drive through that area, doesn't that mess up the argument of the radar and stuff? Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I don't know enough about airports. And then the third question I think that all of us in the community have, and there's a lot of families that live in this area, is what exactly does MAC see as a viable height for whatever structure the developer might want to put in terms of safety? I know that Flying Cloud has more jets right now. I think one of the plans, it sounds like, is trying to increase Flying Cloud and more jets. Is there a safety issue at all in terms of the height that is allowed on that property? I guess those 3 questions, and the questions for you all in terms of what happens if you do pass this or if you don't pass it. Just my own naivety on that. Okay? Thank you.
Is there someone from the commission that would like to come forward and... Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, in regards to the developer discussions, that has only been involved in regarding looking at sites 3 and 4, and those were some independent developers who asked about the ability to do gas convenience with some type of mix of retail potential properties in that same area, whether that be like a Subway convenience location or a Starbucks tied into it or something like that. And that's really the extent of those discussions at this point. And that's where we've come back to the city and said, well, what would you guys like to see in the property? And that's where we are right now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, who can answer? And I know that you're regulated as well. It's not like you can put a 30-foot building in that Zone 6. So tell us a little bit about what your max is, and we'll go from there.
Well, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, we specifically picked these sites based on their location, so we don't have significant height restrictions. There are height restrictions. There are height restrictions within the community, as you acknowledged, anywhere around the airport that the city helps to regulate, as does the FAA. So the last thing we would do is construct something that would be an obstruction to the actual runway approaches. So that's not a concern from our part. We haven't looked at the office parcels close enough yet to have a good feeling for what the ground elevation would be, and then to therefore know what a maximum height would be. We're just not far enough along in the conceptual layouts for that yet. At the time the zoning piece comes forward, like we've talked about having conceptual layouts and such, we will have done that. With regard to the radar site and the road, a moving vehicle on a road is not going to reflect the signal like a large, long structure would.
Thank you. Mr. Kirk, do you have anything for?
I just think we ought to, the gentleman asked a question about what would happen if, based on our action tonight, either approving or not approving. And I think we, again, my understanding is if we approve the action tonight, all we're doing is positioning the city ordinances and the zoning districts so that we can have hearings going forward regarding specific zoning changes for, in all likelihood, the 6 parcels that are discussed.
That's correct. That'd be this meeting is laying the groundwork for future discussions to happen and individual discussions about individual parcels of land.
Now, I think it's very important to think about if we don't move forward with this, then to me, there is not a structured forum to have future discussions. And to have future discussions with MAC and the city and the residents to discuss these. And that's one reason why I'm a proponent of moving forward on these, because I believe it lays the appropriate structure so that we can have the discussions and gain the input from the community and have the same process that we have with any other development that goes on in Eden Prairie. You talked about building heights. That's something that's discussed every time something comes in front of the Planning Commission. That is a consideration. And so I think it's important that we have the structure in place to allow us to have those discussions and to have the input. So I'm a pretty strong proponent of moving forward and moving along the path that's charted here, because I think it will allow us to have healthy discussions.
Well said. Thank you. And with that being said, if there's no one else out in the audience that has any comments, yes, please. And we'll make that the final comment from the audience this evening. Thank you.
So, Rick DeYoung on Tree Farm Road. So I have a question for the MAC representatives. On the radar, if that radar is supporting the MAC, the Metropolitan, the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, commercial airport traffic, is there any reason that it can't be moved other than cost? In other words, if you just need a wide open area, are there other places to the west, across Flying Cloud that you can locate that radar to open up property to the west of Parcel 6 for development? Because right now it sounds like that radar is in the way of using that property for buildings.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the VOR radar that's at Flying Cloud is part of an overall system. There's one up in Crystal, off the Crystal Airport. There's one down at Air Lake. Each one serves different flight tracks in and out of Minneapolis-St. Paul from the different states and different coasts of the country, basically. And so flights coming from the west and from the south are going to track along the VOR at Flying Cloud. Flights coming in from the north, from Canada, for example, or looping around from New York or Japan, will use the Crystal VOR as part of their tracking mechanism. Flights coming up from Rochester and from the southeast will use the Air Lake one. So it's part of an overall system, and it's not quite that simple to just get rid of it or move it. And had we had the opportunity to, there's actually one at MSP as well, at Minneapolis, St. Paul. So if we could have gotten rid of it, believe me, we would have gotten rid of it 3 years ago. That would have made the most sense.
There's a domino effect, in other words, with doing it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Can I clarify my question?
Sure.
Yeah, you can just stay there if you can. I don't know if two people are allowed in here. No, my point is, since it's serving such a wide region, if you move it, say, a quarter mile or half mile away, is there really any impact to the purpose or what it's doing for air traffic control? Because it's covering such a wide area. In my estimation, you move it a quarter mile, it can do the same job. So my thought is not getting rid of it, but just moving it further west so it's not in the way of any buildings that could go up.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and Mr. Neighbor, the answer to the question is it starts to become an obstruction to the runway approaches the closer we move it to the runway ends. So we put it out as far as we could and saved as much of parcel 6 as we could at the same time, but placed that strategically so that it's okay for the 2 runway approaches. It's not so far away that it degrades the signal or anything like that, and it prevented us from having to acquire anybody else's property in order to actually site it somewhere. That was, of course, the biggest factor, was not wanting to have to buy somebody else out.
Understood. Thank you very much. One final question. Go right ahead.
Mr. Franzen, when, say, in the next step, maybe this will help some of the residents, is it true that in the actual zoning that would be specified things like, similar to, like, say, residential, we say 13.5, and then if you want to change it, yes, you have to change the zone again, or, for instances, it would be another process. Are there plans to include those kinds of items of, say, like density, height restrictions, floor area ratio, those kind of things in the actual zoning?
Yes, that's correct. All there now.
Okay.
We're just moving it from these pages over to these pages.
Yep. Hopefully that'll help some residents.
Okay.
We will have a discussion with that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
City staff,
Please.
since I've been piped up here. Mike, what is our charge this evening?
Commission has a responsibility that's identified in Chapter 2 of the City Code. It's your powers and duties of the Planning Commission.
Okay, but we're just looking...
And your charge is to make an advisory recommendation on whether or not the city should go forward with the Guide Plan Amendment to Chapter 3, Guide Plan Amendment to Chapter 5, and the amendments to Chapter 11 to create the airport commercial and airport office districts, laying the groundwork, creating the standards by which we will judge, review, whatever we need to do when they come in and make the request for the rezonings and site plans for the property.
Okay, thank you.
Clear enough, Commissioners? Okay. So with that being said, Commissioners, audience members, and neighbors, and Metropolitan Airport Commission, I appreciate the time and the opportunity that everybody's had to be able to have some open and honest feedback about this process and moving forward. And I appreciate, again, the Metropolitan Airport Commission of being here tonight. Thank you again for your patience and your ability to come out and to talk with us and talk with the audience members tonight. With that being said, I will entertain a motion unless anyone has any follow-up questions from the Commission at all.
Mr. Chairman, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, move to recommend approval of the text amendment to Chapter 3 of the City's Comprehensive Guide Plan, which will identify airport commercial and airport office zoning for the proposed parcels which are currently guided airport. The text amendment to Chapter 5 of the City's Comprehensive Guide Plan relating to safety zones, and the text amendment to Chapter 11 of the City Code to create the airport office and airport commercial zoning districts.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great. Thank you, Mr. Franzen. I appreciate your time with that. Moving on, we have the planner's report of the capital improvement plan draft. Mr. Franzen, you want to take us through that?
Actually, there is an item B that I have to add to that might be more fun. Which one would you like to do first?
I will leave it up to you.
Okay, we'll go with the structure of the order of the agenda. There's a statutory requirement that the Planning Commission has to say that the capital improvement plan is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. For those of you that were here, I think there's 4 of you that were here in 207 and 208, and we did our comp plan. And in our comp plan, we typically identify projects. Projects you typically identify in a comp plan are road and intersection improvements, you might have park acquisition, you might have sidewalks and trails. The capital improvement program plan that you have in front of you is all capital improvements for the city out over 10 years. A portion of what's in the capital improvement plan relates to the comprehensive plan. What I did was take out a couple of examples, like Shady Oak Road is in the comp plan. We said we're going to build it. So the CAP said it's going to cost this much money, and this is when we're going to do it. Then we had another item in there regarding the trail that's in our comp plan. In the CAP, we said, here's the line item, here's what it's going to cost, here's when we're going to do it, and where we're going to get the money from. So you're not asked to go through each one of these items line by line to determine what is in it or what is not in it. That's something that the City Council did at a workshop in late August, early September. The Council has to approve this document in December. We're simply asking you to say in the brief presentation that I've given you that we do have elements from our comp plan in here that are part of the plan for the next 10 years. One more thing to remember is the comp plan goes to 2030. So every few years you start adjusting it. So as you strike some of these items off the list that we've completed portions of our comp plan, then we'll start to add new items to the list because we do the CIP every couple of years. What our City Council wants the chair and the vice chair to do is actually sign a resolution. It's a better format than, actually it's more comfortable doing this by resolution than by a simple motion of the Planning Commission.
Say that last part again.
Our city attorney is asking that the chair and the vice chair sign Resolution 2012-02. I have an original here. This is more preferable as the commission action rather than a motion saying that the CIP is in conformance with the comprehensive plan.
So you are not expecting any motion tonight or anything from this council? You just need my signature and
yes, but if you want to have some discussion about it, if you have any questions about it, we're prepared to answer that.
Very
the
good.
only thing that was required as an action is a signature from the chair and the vice chair.
Okay. Commissioners, are there any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Mr. Franzen, you know for a long time I've had concerns about the town center plan.
Yes.
Right. The whole world is very familiar with that.
I wasn't aware.
There are approximately $27 million of capital improvement projects identified in this that relate to the town center plan. And I have a real concern that putting this down in writing and saying that these are real projects that we are planning to fund is it's just a travesty, because it's talking about building the north-south road in 3 years, going through Emerson property, going by Brunswick zone, who knows what else, on a 15-foot drop where you're going to have to either build a bridge or eliminate Emerson's parking lots, all sorts of really pretty crazy kinds of things. And so I think that anything that has to do with town center really needs to be looked at a second time. Then I'll just give you 3 other quick little ones that might be helpful just from my background. On page 109, there's talk about roofs and built-up roofs versus EPDM roofs. And there's composite coal tar system roofs that I think the city might want to take a look at, that are probably going to work a lot better than asphalt built-up roofs. Because you could end up getting into all sorts of issues with parapet heights and a lot of other stuff if you change from a membrane roof to just an asphalt built-up roof. Then on page 117, it starts to talk about changing out air handling units and cooling towers and reheat coils and things like that on the air handling systems throughout this building. And where this building is 30 years old now, I think it'd be really a good time to have kind of an energy audit done and have somebody look at if this is the right system given today's situation, And there's actually some new federal money that may come available to help support upgrading energy improvements. And Xcel Energy will have some money available if you do lighting improvements, and kind of putting all that together with new forms of lighting. You can decrease air conditioning loads and all kinds of things that can make this a much more efficient operation. And rather than kind of piecemealing the improvements, I think it would be helpful. And then finally, the last one is on page 215, the water treatment plant. I know the water treatment plant, the last edition was like 1988 or something. On other projects that I've been involved with, they do a lot of automation and controls updates over the last 10, 15 years that can really streamline operating expenses. And I didn't see where, there's anything planned in that area. And it might be worth taking a look at some improvements in automation and control systems on the treatment plant that could really save us some money in the long term. So that was relative to page 215. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I had a question. Mr. Franzen, I see the total cost for everything is over $250 million. I'm just curious because I know this is an important issue for the residents. Is this money that has already been planned? Does the city already have it, or is it considered as the funds will become available based on property taxes over the years? And if, unfortunately, we go through something like we did in 2008 and the city becomes very strapped for money, would projects then be dropped, or would the council also consider raising taxes?
Can't answer that question. That's kind of a council call. I can tell you that we do list funding sources that are in here. Some of them may not have the funding sources identified. $250 million is a lot of improvements to do even over a 10-year time period, but you want to have a comprehensive list of all the potential things you can pick and choose from that list, which ones you want to do, which ones are the most important, which ones are the most cost effective for the city, which ones give us the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak.
One follow-up question. I saw there is the interchange with Shady Oak, and is it 62 in here, or did I read that incorrectly?
It should be County Road 61.
Okay.
And Shady Oak Road. And Shady Oak Road, which is County Road 61, and Trunk Highway 212. That's the interchange.
Yes, thank you. That's what I was thinking of. Sorry. For the new office development, basically. Is that correct? That's going up just north of there that we...
United Health is up
Yeah.
there.
Well, it's kind of phase 2 of the Shady Oak Road improvements that were kind of the UHG project was a catalyst for some of these improvements because of the amount of traffic that they're generating off that site. So the northerly segment is going to be under construction. Actually, it's going to be bid here. It was bid last week. And the south section is going to be planned for, I think, 2014.
And excuse me, I know we did talk about this when the project was under review. Is that property paying for a portion of this project? Was the project pushed sooner because of that development than when it would have happened originally?
Well, as far as Phase 1, they're paying a bulk of that cost. As far as Phase 2, which is the interchange with 212, they are paying a portion of that. But it's not necessarily driving that project. They are paying a share, but it's tied to their developments of their second and third phases.
Okay.
But we want to get the project done as soon as possible due to the fact that they will be occupying that building starting next year. And also we got some money from a MnDOT deed grant that we're going to use to help finance that project. So,
okay. Great, thank you.
I'd also, I guess, like to kind of, an earlier question you had about the funding sources and the $250 million, can kind of clarify some of that. As Mike briefly mentioned, there are a number of funding sources in here. So the $250 million is not city funds. That $250 million can be county funds, state funds, assessments, different type things. So it's a combination of funds, and so sometimes it's a little deceiving when we show a project. If you look in more of the detail of the project, it'll show that it's being funded by Economic Development Fund or state aid or assessments or development or whatever. So in order to, you always kind of struggle with that because we sometimes show, for example, 169,494 in the previous CIP, we showed that in there as a $150 million project where our share was $3 million, but it showed up as $150 million being spent, of which many of it came from other cities and MnDOT. So.
Great. Thank you for that explanation.
Mr. Franson, real quick, is this document part of city record? I mean, is this a public record document?
It will be once the council adopts that in December.
Got it. Okay. Travis, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question for probably Mr. Franson or Mr. Rue. The franchise fee scheduling that was approved by council some time back, I think a year or a little more ago, what extent is that utilized within the public works and within street improvements? Is that only for, I'm thinking as there were improvements down by the Mac property on Mitchell Road or County Road 4 extension south of 1, and I'm assuming that was done under this guise, the franchise fee possibly under that funding source, and then other improvements around the MAC. I'm just thinking of because we had MAC and possible roads and various things that came up in discussion in such a preliminary stage down the road, but how can we allocate that franchise fee and what's the extent of that?
The franchise fee is actually, if you look on page 32, it talks about the pavement management fund. The franchise fee will fund that pavement management fund. So it shows $2 million annually for 5 years. That's what that franchise fee funds. Now that's more for maintenance of existing roads, for our overlays, seal coats, and maybe some reconstruction of some of the older roads as they just kind of wear out. But Mitchell Road, for example, was a combination of, with Mac's potential development of Parcel 3, they're going to pay a portion of that cost. Grace Church was assessed a portion of that cost, and then the city picked up the rest of it. So there was no pavement management funds, or actually city funds in that, because of state aid, that's a state aid route, so we used our municipal state aid funds as the city share. So, like I said, the franchise fees go strictly toward that pavement management fund, and you'll see there's a bump in it in the next 5 years, which would have to be a future action to increase that fund in 2018. Did that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, it does. I was just wanting to know the scope and extent of that fund or the franchising fee and how it's allocated, and so whether or not the new developments for the MAC would come down the pipeline, if that would be placed, the burden of the cost of improvements would be placed on the individual developers down MAC, and then any of the other adjacent, like the Phase 6, Parcel 6, stuff like that. It was just on the top of my mind as we were discussing it today.
Well, any project that we deal with, either a city project or a development project, we attempt to get a multiple funding sources in order to get those projects financed. A development generally pays for a bulk of that, of the cost for improvements. Like UHG was an example where many of the improvements are paid for by them because they're creating the need for the capacity improvements. Same as a development of, they're building their own roads. There's sometimes a city share, but more than likely not. The city share on some of the recent developments has been, if we want to oversize a water main, we'll pay for the oversizing of the water main. Very minor costs. Otherwise, most of it's paid by developments. Some of the more regional roads, the collector roads, if you will, those we use a combination of municipal state aid. We can only use that we're able to use municipal state aid on 20% of our network, which is mainly the main roads. We have to designate those routes, and then we can use those state aid dollars, which are gas tax revenues that get filtered down to cities. We can use those state aid funds on those particular roads only. So the other 80% of the roads in town, the minor city streets and so forth. That's where the pavement management fund comes in. So it's not much money when you consider it's probably financing 180 miles of street. But it does, we've been fairly aggressive at trying to do preventative projects rather than reconstruct. So we're trying to spend the money on overlays and seal coats and trying to minimize the amount of reconstruction that we do. But if we do get into reconstruction, we'd have to try to finance it out of that project as well, or out of that pavement management fund as well, or find some other sources.
I guess just one other quick question. I haven't spent much time really looking at it. Need to do some more of that. But it seems like there are periodically some conceptual issues with future city center planning that come up, kind of implying that maybe there needs to be a little bit of a relook at what was originally assumed to be done in the city center and so on. I'm wondering, does a signature on this document by the chair and the vice chair imply that the Planning Commission is fully satisfied with the city center planning and the resulting capital improvements that are listed in the plan, or do we have some, or in this plan, or do we have some flexibility in the future to have more discussion around that and address any conceptual issues? Because in some discussions I've had with other folks in the past, they were kind of saying, well, it's really not even feasible to be moving ahead with this concept or that concept in the city center. It's not workable. And so I just was curious, are we locking into current planning with this, or are we fine in terms of more flexibility?
If it's in our comp plan, we need line items to show how we're going to build that item in the comprehensive plan. If you just don't like the town center, you don't want it to be in the CAP, and with the next guide plan update, you'd say, I want to revisit the town center. If the town center is not in the next guide plan update, you wouldn't have any line items in the CAP for its implementation. So all we're saying here tonight is, if anything that's in our comp plan that says something we're going to do, the state law says you've got to have a mechanism in order to build this. This is what the Met Council is saying, is that you go through the effort of developing a plan for your city, you want to make sure that you're following your own plan and you're building it. So if you don't follow the plan, for example, maybe it has a potential regional impact. So all we're saying is we have stuff in our comp plan that appears in the CAP, and that's all you're saying. You're acknowledging that you do have items that reflect action statements from the comp plan. You're not saying I agree or disagree with that.
Thank you.
So everything that fits in this packet that's 230 pages currently fits in our current comp plan. Is that accurate?
I would say a very small portion of the CAP relates to action items in the comp plan.
Okay.
So if we're putting a new roof on our buildings, obviously we wouldn't have that in our comp plan.
Right. Understood.
Road improvements, park acquisition, trails and sidewalks, utilities. It's it's the building of the city, the infrastructure needed to support your planning efforts.
Understood. Okay. Sign away.
Sign I'll even say it's in tremendous agreement with even the flawed portions of our comprehensive guide plan.
Duly noted. Thank you, sir. Mr. Franzen, moving on.
Item number B, mark your calendars. We're also going to send this back out to you by email as a reminder. On Thursday, October 11th, 2012, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., right here in the Heritage Room, we're going to have the Environmental Protection Agency and their consultants coming out to talk with us about how you do a LEED neighborhood design for the land area around Golden Triangle. We're one of 8 cities in the country that received grants for someone to come out with local experts to tell us how we can do a better job of making walkable, bikeable, resource-efficient, and equitable neighborhoods, although I don't understand the equitable part of it at this point. So they're going to take a look at our comp plan. They're going to look at the plan that our vice chair put together as part of his graduate work for housing in that area and advise us the steps we might want to take in order to implement those things. So there's a series of meetings that are going on. There's meetings that are going to happen with business people in the area that occur during the day. Another stakeholders group are going to be the City Council, the Planning Commission, Parks and Rec, Conservation, Human Rights and Diversity. They're trying to gain your perspective about this area and introduce you into LEED neighborhood design. So this is a very fun workshop. Some of you that are on the CAC have to make a decision about whether or not you want to go to the CAC meeting or go to this meeting. Now, I will tell you from the first half hour of the CAC meeting, I'm making a presentation on the plan for Golden Triangle and the plan for City West. It's part of the broader educational thing that Hennepin County and the Met Council wants us to do to enlighten all of our CAC members about what's going on in these stations. So one meeting is in St. Louis Park, and that's the CAC meeting. The other meeting is here.
Great.
Okay, so a quick question. Is this something to just show up to or RSVP?
It would be nice if you RSVP. You can just let Lori know that you're coming. You already have 2 rooms booked, so the space is not an issue.
And that will be coming via email to us?
Yes, we thought we would do that again by email. This was hot off the presses today.
Great.
Didn't have time to get this into the packet because we didn't know a lot of the details about it until the very last minute from the Environmental Protection Agency.
Very good.
So it's
Matt,
coming on fast. I think you'll enjoy this.
Okay, just so you know, Matt, I'll be traveling that day. So.
Just a quick, more personal question for myself. Do you anticipate a lot of critical critique of my graduate work?
I can tell you by far that this was the best graduate work that I saw of all the graduate work that was done on any of the station sites in the corridor.
I'll believe you for now. Thank you very much.
At least it sounded good.
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that you didn't see any others.
Anything else from planners' report perspective, Mr. Francis?
I have nothing else for a planner's report this evening.
Very good. Members' report. I know we have one item on the agenda.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and committee members, I did attend the CAC meeting. I believe it was a little under 2 weeks ago. Not a whole lot to report. I can tell you the first 5 minutes this was the same day that the project was awarded. It's a $2 million award from the Department of Employment and Economic Development. So very pleased that keeps the project on pace, I believe, till June of 2013. Then the rest of the meeting, I kid you not, was really talking about talking. It literally was the whole rest. I have to confess I had to leave early for another engagement. But the whole discussion was whether or not the following meeting should revolve around the freight rail issue, the co-location or relocation issue of freight rail in St. Louis Park. That was literally the next hour and a half of the meeting.
Very good.
So not a whole lot to report on that end. I just want to, Mr. Franzen, can you comment on where the city's at right now with the possible relocation of the town center station? Or where that process is at?
Well, actually, we were going to talk about this evening, but we figured we'd spend a couple hours tonight. So absolutely, positively, 99.9% certain that after the only public hearing we have on Home Depot's expansion of their outdoor garden area, that you'll have a presentation from the staff, from Janet and David, about the whole town center stuff.
And when will we see that presentation? Is there a date?
October 8th.
October 8th. Very good.
Beautiful. Thank you.
For that project, just for the rest of you guys to know, I will most likely have to abstain since I live right behind it.
Yeah, I guess there would be action for the Home Depot. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very good. Any other members' reports for tonight? Any continuing business at all? Any new business? Not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's closed. Thank you very much.
Sign your life,
I know.
You're all going to be in a picture with that thing.